Hi everyone, in today's video what I'm going to be doing is explaining to you a planning structure that I've developed over a few years to approach the GCSE in viewpoint writing. Now the main purpose of this planning structure is to avoid you falling into the trap of running out of things to say, which can be quite easy, especially when you're being asked to write on a topic that you might not feel too familiar with. And it can be really easy to just write a paragraph about why you agree and then kind of run out of time and run out of speed. Now it's really, really important with this piece, with this question. I'm going to use the question that I showed you in the first video. The question's about homework, right? And you have to decide. The best piece of writing will come out of you deciding for or against. I would avoid doing something that you might be taught to do in other subjects where you give one side then the other then go back and forth, because part of the mark scheme asks whether your communication is clear, and it can be hard for your communication to be clear if you're not actually sure what you're saying. Most good articles or good pieces of writing will have a really clear opinion to give and a really clear idea to give. So we're going to just focus on for or against when we do a piece of writing. Now this structure can be used for any question, any topic, and it just follows a kind of 4 simple paragraph structure. So the way we begin is we start with an anecdote. Now an anecdote, if you've not heard of it, which is absolutely fine, it's not an antidote, that's a different thing. An anecdote is a short, personal, tends to be personal, story of something that's happened, okay? So, what you're gonna do is open your speech or blog or article with an event. Now obviously it's creative, it's still a form of creative writing what we're doing. They're not expecting you to have researched a topic. For example, if it was homework or celebrities, they're not expecting you to sit in a 45-minute exam and come up with a fully formed article. They want to know that you know what that should look like. So this structure works for an article or a speech or anything, because these different components can be used for any of those types of writing. So an anecdote is a persuasive device, isn't it? It's often forcing the reader, so makes the reader empathise. And when you empathise, you put yourself in someone else's shoes. So if the topic was on celebrities and you wanted to give an example of why celebrities should be celebrated and they're a positive thing, you're going to tell an anecdote or a story about a celebrity that does really positive things with their fame. So for example, you might tell a story about a celebrity who gives a lot of money to charity or spends a lot of time working for charities. The really important thing is that your anecdote should back up your view. So if the question was on uniform and you want your article to be all about how uniform is a really bad thing and you want to get rid of it, you wouldn't write an anecdote about somebody wearing their uniform and feeling part of the community and part of a group, and because that serves the opposite. It makes the reader think of the opposite thing that you want them to. So you use this anecdote to really throw the reader straight into a story that they will have to empathise with you. And it also is quite good in this part to use some emotive language, because you want them to respond with some sort of emotion. That might be guilt, it could be a positive emotion, it might be happiness or something like that, but you're going to try and grab the reader straight away and make them agree with what you're saying. Now, the second paragraph, which we'll go to now, is a research paragraph. Now again, let me be clear, they are not expecting you to know loads of facts and statistics about the topic. Now, first of all, you would have just read a whole paper because the paper links. So you would have just read 2 sources that relate to the topic. So you can obviously use those, any ideas from those sources or anything you found out from those sources in your piece of writing. Again, your research should back up your view, but the point of it is that you are showing that you know that if you were to go away and write an article or write a speech, you would have to do your research. And the research is going to be things that prove, a bit like the backing up your view thing, it has to prove your point, okay? So the types of things you're going to include here, you're going to be using statistics. They will come from reliable sources, like maybe a survey or a questionnaire. I'll put that as a second point. It needs to be reliable sources. So for example, you're not going to say something like, my mate John asked his 5 friends that he plays football with and they all said they hate uniform. Nobody's going to care. It needs to be something realistic, like the UK government or Ofsted carried out research into schools as to the happiest schools, and they found that 70% of the schools that did not have a uniform had students that reported they were happy at school. That sounds reliable, and what it also sounds is realistic. And what I mean by that is always avoid saying 100%. I don't think I've ever heard of a questionnaire or a survey where 100% of people all agreed on the same thing. So be realistic, give yourself a realistic percentage that still backs you up, but isn't something that sounds like someone's made it up. And then what you can also do here in this paragraph is do experts' opinions. Now try and pick someone who's like relevant to the topic. So if it was uniform, you might pick a head teacher of a local school. If it was to do with celebrity, you might pick a celebrity to give a comment. Obviously, you're going to have to make it up and don't make it sound ridiculous. Again, it goes back to this reliable and realistic thing. Now, the reason people use research in their non-fiction writing is to make themselves sound valid. Okay, so people agree when you give them statistics. So we have to show the examiner that we understand that that's part of non-fiction writing, but we've got to be careful here that we don't make it ridiculous. Okay, paragraph 3 is your counter-argument paragraph. Now, I know I just said you're not going to give both sides, and it's really important that I am not saying you are giving both sides. What you need to do in this paragraph here is you're going to say what other people think and explain why they're wrong, right? So if you were having an argument with someone, which I'm sure you don't because you're all good people, but say you were going to have an argument with your parents about going out somewhere, you might go to them and you might say, I know you think it's going to cost money, but I've already got this money from here. I know that you are worried that I'm going to be back late, but I'll be back at this time. And I know that you're worried that I've got homework to do, but I've already done it all. What you're doing there is you're giving the counter argument, because you're saying, you're preempting, you're kind of knowing what the person's going to say, and you're telling them why it's wrong. And that's what you do in this paragraph here. Okay, so explain why opposite view. So it's not a case of agreeing, right, with the other people. You'll say, and we'll go through how to write the sentences in more detail when I go through the video on counter arguments. But you'll say something like, although these people think this, I think, and then you explain your reason. So what you do there is also, it helps you with your marks for your sentence structures because you use a subordinating connective. But what you do is you say, they're wrong and I'm right, they're wrong and I'm right. And you might even define who is likely to think the opposite. So for example, if we were doing uniform and you're arguing against uniform, you might think that teachers might think that uniforms are a positive thing. So you would say, although some teachers might argue that wearing uniform prevents bullying because people are all wearing the same thing, comma, I believe that people are equally as likely to bully because people can get picked on for the way they wear their uniform as much as they might get picked on for their own clothing, for example. And then finally, your last paragraph, which is actually quite short, now there's no reason you can't use rhetorical questions throughout, just to be clear, but in your final paragraph, what you're going to be doing is setting up a rhetorical challenge. And what I mean by that is you're going to ask a series of rhetorical questions to the reader, or if it was a speech, it would be the audience. This is a really powerful rhetorical device to end a speech or a article, to leave the reader considering what they think on your topic by forcing them by asking questions. And 3 or 4 in a row can be quite powerful, but they must be detailed. The types of things that we are not including are things like, what do you think? That is a ridiculous rhetorical question. And the reason it's a ridiculous rhetorical question is because it leaves them completely open to say they disagree. If you finish an argument with someone and then you say, what do you think? Then they can easily say, oh, I disagree with you. The types of things we're looking for is, how would you feel if? And then you explain a situation that backs you up. So how would you feel if you spent every day of your working career trapped in a tie that felt like it was suffocating you? That is making the person who's listening think about how bad uniform is. It's not making them think what they think. Now, the best thing to do here, and this is what we're going to do, is link, and this is where the structural features come in, link back to past 3 paragraphs. So what you're going to want to do, I'm going to show you how you do this now. I'm just going to get a coloured pen to do it. That should be fine. Right, so what you're going to do is you're going to give yourself 3 questions at least that link back to your 3 paragraphs. So for example, you might pick something that you've said in your counter argument and you might have that as your first question. Then you might pick a statistic from your research, and then that might be your second question. And then your third question might go back to the very opening of your anecdote. And then what you've also done is you've created yourself a cyclical structure because you've ended where you began. So your final line will go back to that anecdote at the start that was quite powerful and made the reader think a certain thing. So hopefully that's really clear. I'm now going to do a quick example, which is not going to take as long as it took me to explain it, because a plan should only take you about 5 minutes. And obviously I can do them a little bit quicker because I've practiced them a lot of times before. So let's just pretend we're going to do the homework one, and I'm going to be against homework. Okay, nice and easy. So start with my anecdote. In my anecdote, I'm going to start with an imperative. I'm going to say, imagine being confined, imprisoned, and restricted within your own home. So I'm going to describe an anecdote of being almost trapped at home, unable to go out and enjoy the sunshine outside. I might like maybe describe the clock ticking as you struggle to complete, you know, your 5 hours of English homework. That's how much we give you. So that's my anecdote. My anecdote is going to tell a story of someone almost trapped inside, almost like they're in a prison. I'm going to kind of use it as a metaphor. And the great thing about this paragraph is it gives you an opportunity to use a lot of your descriptive writing, because it will feel a little bit like creative writing. Okay, research. I'm going to say that Childline, which they often carry out studies into children's well-being, showed that 70% of students were staying up late for homework, not getting a good night's sleep. I'm going to say that there's a local school with a head teacher called Mr. John, I can't think of his surname, Foxton, who banned, so they banned homework, and they found that grades increased. And then I'm going to have a quote from him, like, our church students were so much happier and they actually did better in their exams, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's paragraph 1. Paragraph 2, my counter argument, who might agree with homework? Let's go for sixth forms maybe. Think homework is good because it prepares students to be independent. But if they are spending so long doing homework, they won't have time to prepare for things like sixth forms. That's how I'm gonna counter it. Maybe teachers. I think homework is a useful way of providing revision, but I'm gonna say that students actually don't have enough time to revise because they're set pointless homework. Side note, that's why in English your homework is revision. Anyway, side point. So, and then finally my 4th paragraph, this is where it's quite easy to do because I'm just going to go back to 3 things I've already said. So I'm just going to grab a highlighter for myself. So my first one is going to be, if you were ahead of sixth form, would you prefer your students to be independent or to be successful and happy? So that links back to this one. My second one, I'm going to go back to that school that I made up. So would you rather have your child, because remember if it's an article, it's going to be parents most likely reading it. Would you rather have your child at a school like this one, I'm going to make up the name when I write it, where the children are happy and performing well but aren't overburdened with homework? And then my third one is going to go right back to this list of 3 that I'm going to start with. So how would you feel if you were confined, imprisoned, restricted within one cell of a room because you were unable to go outside with your friends because of the amount of homework you had to do? And then it goes straight back to the start. Okay, so there is the structure. I know you know, that was quite a quick way of going through it. So now what's going to happen is there's going to be 4 videos that talk you through each paragraph. I'm going to explain some tips for that paragraph, show you an example of it in a piece of non-fiction, and then write a model for you so that you can see what it should look like. Hopefully that was useful, and maybe see you for the next video.